Hey guys, so you've probably already heard this by now, Battlefield 5 is getting cancelled in June. Despite EA claiming they will keep supporting the game until the next Battlefield is released, they are cancelling the live service support, which is, well, I'm not gonna get into details, it's disgusting they're doing it because they have advertised and they have promised they will keep updating it for at least 2 years and until the next game comes out, and the next game doesn't come out for at least a year at this point. Anyway, in today's video, we're gonna take a look at what actually happened with Battlefield 5. The actual details, including the player numbers for Battlefield 5, which up until this point have not been reviewed anywhere, and no one knew how many players have actually been playing Battlefield 5, so yeah, that's, I guess, something interesting to look at. Also, it will be funny to compare it to the data and player retention that EA used, or DICE used, to make decisions such as TDK changes and some other updates which they included. So yeah, let's jump into it. Let's see why Battlefield 5 has actually failed so massively. So, let's get into it. Some of you guys probably know that previous Battlefield games, Battlefield 3, 4, Hardline, Battlefield 1, had actually public access to EA's API, allowing third-party websites to access data about online players and also pull players' data to compare statistics on their third-party websites. With Battlefield 5, this has not been possible, and it had to be all extracted manually from the game, so those charts and the spreadsheet you will see only covers the PC portion of the player base. However, if we compare the PC numbers and we compare overall trends, we can draw some conclusions. Luckily, we also have access to data provided by Battlefield Network, by Battlefield Tracker, the Tracker Network, from Battlefield 1, so we can also compare those and see how they reflect and how Battlefield 1 retained players versus how Battlefield 5 has retained them. If we take a look at Battlefield 5 population graph, we can see that Battlefield 5 player base has steeply declined ever since the game came out. Now, this chart only covers the months from January to March with daily measurements, but still, you can see the actual trend and how many players were actually leaving the game, despite the fact that at that point they have implemented the TDK 2.0, the first TDK iteration, okay? They implemented the first TDK iteration to keep players who joined during Christmas engaged in the game and prevent them from leaving. Because here's the thing, when players start leaving, and remember at that point we didn't even have the paid microtransaction system implemented to the game yet, if they leave and they never come back, and them doing so is quite important to EA because they have switched their whole business model to selling skins instead of selling content, so yeah, it's quite important for those players to keep playing the game. But as we can see, they haven't been. They've been leaving the game and they have not been logging back in. Now, what's interesting is that 25th of January 2019, that's not 2020, we're in 2019 now, let's keep it in mind, over a year ago, around 2.5 months after Battlefield 5 was released, this game dropped on PC below 19,000 players during its peak. Now, if we compare this to Battlefield 1 using the data provided by Battlefield 1 Tracker, we can see that Battlefield 1 has actually not dropped below 20k concurrent players during the peak on PC until Battlefield 5 has been released, which means it's taken Battlefield 1 2 years to get to the point at which Battlefield 5 with its player base has been at after 2 months of release. This is crazy, like, those numbers are actually crazy, and I know it sold less copies, there's been more refunds because players didn't enjoy the game and EA allows them to refund if they don't like it within the first 10 hours of playing the game. I know all of this, but even the fact that it has been so low for Battlefield 5 that quickly, like, it's honestly insane. And if you want to look further after the video, there is a whole bunch of different events described in this spreadsheet, the measurements where players have been leaving, despite the fact that EA tried to retain them with everything they possibly could. They implemented the live service, the Tides of War chapter rewards, and Tides of War trees with assignments. Now, the problem with those was that, as you can also see in, in the data, players have not been completing. They have not been coming back to complete those trees with assignments, or I don't know how to call them. I call them like they're similar to skill trees. Anyway, they have not been coming back to complete those because DICE gave them the option to purchase the guns a week later for some ridiculously low amount of company coins, so no one bothered to even complete those missions. We can look at the data and see that for the first 3 months of 2019, the player base has been steadily declining day after day. Now, you might wonder why is this only 3 months of 2019 of daily measurements, because it's measured up until the point of Firestorm being released, but as you guys probably remember and probably are aware, Firestorm is completely dead. You can't even matchmake into the game on PC, in Europe at least, with a full lobby. You can matchmake with like 10 people, so I doubt that all of the players who suddenly disappeared from the vanilla game were playing Firestorm, because you guys know, no one has been playing Firestorm after a couple of weeks, pretty much, because you can't even matchmake into the game. As I mentioned earlier, guys, all of the data that I'm using in this video is available down below in the description. You can look at it yourself, you can verify it, you can draw your own conclusions, you can do pretty much anything you want with it at this point. Just so you guys know, all of the credit goes to the guy called DFK, because he supplied me with the data, and he's a trusted member of community, so it's not some BS, like... At this point, the only way that EA could potentially go out and say, hey, this is false, is if they showed us their data, but they're not going to do that because they will match, or be at least somewhat accurate, because, again, the data presented in the spreadsheet, it is not 100% accurate, but then again, it represents the trend and it shows how Battlefield 5 players behaved. We can take a look and see that after EA Play and during the holidays or vacation period of 2019, Battlefield 5 has hit lowest lows of 10,000 concurrent players during the peak, which is bizarre. Like, no other Battlefield game, except for maybe Battlefield Hardline on PC, has ever reached such small numbers. None. They have got like 45,000 online players during the peak when they released the Pacific DLC, or the Pacific expansion, because we don't have DLCs in Battlefield 5, and then made the game actually free to play. They had to make the game free to play in order for it to actually gain traction and get some players. But then again, they wanted to keep those players when they saw the spike, and they released the new TDK. Unfortunately, we do not have data to support the next statement I'm going to make about the TDK change at the end of 2019, but it didn't work either, and, well, you can see it, they reversed it, or partially reversed it, it's not fully reversed, but still, it didn't work. They couldn't retain those players either. For the past 1.5 years, DICE has been putting the game up for sale every single time it's got a huge spike of players. Look at the statistics. When has been the biggest sale of Battlefield 5? When Christmas of 2018 actually started. They've dropped the price around 2 weeks after the release by 50%. That's never happened in the history of AAA games. 50% within 2 weeks. What is this? And they had the peak. They tried changing the game to retain all of those players, as you can see in the graph, and then they were falling off. They couldn't retain them. Same with the sale. Yeah, there was a sale and free-to-play weekend during the Pacific War release. They released the game for free, players jumped in, and again, they put another TDK update according to their data. But now we know that their data, which they referred to while making all of those TDK changes, is actually false. Or not the data, but their statements about basing the opinion on data, because they've already had data. They've changed TDK first time and it didn't work. They've kept losing players. because not only were they losing players who played the game before, because they didn't enjoy the changes, they've also been losing players who jumped onto the game during Christmas because, well, we can get into that in a second. Why is Battlefield 5 losing so many players? Because that's interesting, it's all about players, right? The whole business model of Battlefield 5, and I've been repeating this over and over again, I've made videos about it in 2017, in 2019, Battlefield 5's business model is not selling new content, it is selling skins. So, they have to retain players. If they can't retain players, they can't make money. Like, if there is no customer that could possibly spend money with you, how can you convince them, or how can you even try convincing them to start spending money if they're not even in your store? Like, that's the analogy. So, they had to keep the players in the game, and they couldn't do that for a couple of reasons. The first one being, well, people didn't enjoy the theme of Battlefield 5. I don't know if you guys know this, but in March of 2017 there's been a huge shift in DICE's management at DICE Stockholm. This is all publicly available on LinkedIn, you can research it. And Battlefield 5 has actually been designed, or, well, it had senior leadership of a completely new set of people who have never actually executed such project before. So, why did Battlefield 5 actually lose all of those players now that we know that it actually has been losing them for, well, practically the whole time, and now at least we cannot argue that, hey, the game wasn't dying the whole time. Yes, it was, and yes, it hasn't been completely dead. You could join the game and play it, but that's not the point. The point is, once the game starts declining, or once the player base of the game starts declining, there will not be new content, or there will not be as much new content as there could possibly be if there actually kept the whole player base engaged, because less players, less money, less funding for the new maps and new content, etc, etc. DICE Stockholm had a huge change in leadership. People who have previously worked on previous Battlefield games and Battlefield 1 left DICE, or they simply retired, and we've had a new wave of people come into management. Those people have made decisions, such as what the theme and the representation of Battlefield 5's version of World War II will be. Now, you might remember one particular guy whose name is Demise99, aka Alan Kurtz, after the reveal of Battlefield 5, where he proudly said that he pushed for women in Battlefield 5 in the form that they have been presented in the trailer, because he wanted his 2-year-old daughter to be able to be a woman in a video game. Now, the problem with that is that this, said Mr. Alan Kurtz, is actually the lead person when it comes to decision making on Battlefield 5 at DICE. You can even see it, according to his own LinkedIn description, he is responsible for a team of 10 designers. Now, here is the problem with the current management. If the game and all of the decisions regarding what will happen to the game, such as time to kill changes or new content that will be pushed out, are dependent on the person who, well, pretty much disregarded their whole fanbase and all of the customers they actually need for their product to function, it's quite tragic, because how can such person make rational decisions regarding the product? Now, what is the problem with such management? Well, the problem is, if anyone at DICE wants to make any decision regarding new stuff or adjustments or practically anything with Battlefield 5, it has to be accepted by Mr. Kurtz, which, as he has already presented to us with his public statements after Battlefield 5 reveal, he does not really care much about customers and the actual players who pay for playing the game and ultimately fund the job and the product they're developing. He does not particularly care about their opinion. He's actually motivated to execute his own vision of Battlefield, and as he already pointed out, doesn't matter. The customers don't matter. What matters is getting his daughter satisfied with being able to be a woman in a video game. Now, if you're wondering why we have such bizarre changes in Battlefield 5, such as time to kill shifts, even though that the guy actually responsible for the gunplay, Florian Drangsy, said multiple times he will not be changing it, and then suddenly it gets changed. It's because, well, there is someone higher up the food chain in the leadership who is actually dictating and approving those changes. You have to understand that all of the changes that have happened to Battlefield 5, all of the stuff that's been added, removed, all of this stuff, it has to be approved by this guy. And a couple of others who also don't play the game. Like, let's be real, they don't play the game. Now, you guys might be wondering, why aren't EA game changers changing the game or, like, helping EA make the right decisions? Because there you have a whole bunch of people, like, there is like 160, 170 game changers for Battlefield 5 alone, and why aren't those people actually helping DICE make the right decisions? And I've been getting this question quite a lot, and I've been seeing this question quite a lot all over Reddit and Twitter lately when it comes to Battlefield 5 decision making. And well, being part of the program, I can tell you that, well, we do help them and we do give them a lot of feedback. The problem with that is that this feedback that at least I have given multiple times is never acted upon. We can't change anything. Like, the game changer name is just a name. You don't actually change the game when you are a game changer. And I know that some of you guys might find it hard to believe, but pretty much 99% of times when there is a discussion on Reddit or on Twitter regarding some problems in Battlefield 5, like, most of the game changers have the exact same opinion as you guys. Like, that's the reality. Like, we give the feedback, we can't change anything. So guys, to summarize it, this is pretty much the reality of Battlefield 5 that I've been living in for the past 2 years almost. So, the game has constantly been losing players. They could not retain any of the new players who joined the game, or they could retain a very low percentage of them. The game changers cannot really influence anything, so it's not like we're some sort of an evil circle of Illuminatis ruling and deciding on the fate of Battlefield franchise with EA executives and we're paid for it. Like, no, none of this is actually true. No one's getting paid for anything, and no one is also deciding on anything, because all of the feedback that we are giving is, well, kindly collected by the community managers, who are, by the way, great people to work with when it comes to providing them with feedback, but after the feedback reaches them and goes out from them to the studio, nothing ever happens. Like, nothing. So we can't influence anything, and don't think that Westy or Jackfrags making videos actually change anything regarding Battlefield 5's development. It doesn't completely change anything. The guy in charge of Battlefield 5 and developing the game and his peers at DICE, they do not care, okay? They do not care about opinions of game changers, they do not care about opinions of YouTubers, and certainly not those of Reddit. Now guys, just to make it clear, I am not referring to all of the employees at DICE and all of the developers who work on designing Battlefield 5, because the developers who are on the lower level in the corporate structure of DICE, those who are actually coding and coming up with the features or implementing them into the game, and that they're doing the actual work, most of them are great. Like, most of those people have great ideas, most of them are genuine people who are actually playing the game, in the contrary to some of the people in the seniorship positions and senior leadership positions. And yeah, that's how Battlefield 5 actually failed. This has been my perspective for the past 2 years. As I've said, all of the links are left down in the description. You can look at the data yourself, you can, well, send the video to your friends who are wondering why did Battlefield 5 die. Well, it died because no one wanted to play the game, and so yeah, that's it for the video, guys. I am not sure if I will be producing more Battlefield 5 videos, because, well, there is nothing to talk about. Like, the game failed. I expected it to fail massively, but I honestly thought it would last at least till Gamescom 2020 and they will have content for EA Play in June and then Gamescom in August, but I guess since the whole pandemic thing and they're working from home now, they can easily say, hey, we're just cutting the support for the game, and yeah. Remember to buy the game in 2021, in October, I think. It's most likely to happen. Yeah, so, as always guys, if you enjoyed, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and I don't know, I would usually say see you on the battlefield, but does anyone even still play Battlefield at this point from my audience? Like, yeah, see ya guys, bye.